What is going on, everybody? It is a Tuesday afternoon here in New York City. Dan Grassa sitting in for Stephen A. on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and seen across the world on ESPN News. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. At Dan Grassa if you want to tweet away at me, as we encourage you to do so here over the course of the program. We will talk a little National Football League a little bit later on in the show with our ESPN NFL analyst Mike Tannenbaum. He will join us at the start of hour number 2. And it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. We might as well get right into it here because, kind of as we alluded to yesterday when we were doing the show, the Cowboys in the news yet again, and there's really no resolution from things that have been percolating the last few days in regards to Zeke Elliott and his holdout. But Josina Anderson, our colleague here at ESPN, had a report that Zeke is not going to show up for the regular season until he gets himself a new contract here. Now, keep in mind, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, he's under contract through 2020. So still that's 2 more seasons. And the Cowboys have been down this road before. It was a long time ago. Some of you might be old enough to remember, some of you may not. But back in 1993, Cowboys were getting ready to defend their Super Bowl championship. Remember, they destroyed the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl to close out 92, came back with a loaded team again, figured that they would be in position to win, except Emmitt Smith, their all-pro running back, was not part of it to start training camp. He was a holdout. He didn't feel that he was compensated fairly enough for what he was able to give them out on the football field. He held out all through training camp, all through the preseason. He even held out to start the regular season. Missed the first 2 weeks. Dallas lost the first 2 games. Jerry Jones decided, you know what? I like winning a heck of a lot more than I like losing. So he decided to open up his checkbook. They gave Emmitt Smith a good, big, new, fat contract, made him the highest-paid running back in the league at the time. Smith comes onto the field. He's a beast. Cowboys win their second straight Super Bowl, and Emmitt's a big part of the reason why. Not saying that history is going to repeat itself the same way here for the Cowboys this time around, because there's other things in play. Back then, the Cowboys were already the best team in the sport, hands down, and Emmitt Smith can almost be viewed as a missing piece. All right, they were the defending Super Bowl champs. This team is not the defending champs. They won the NFC East last year, but I think that they're going to have their work cut out for them with Zeke, without Zeke, just to repeat as division champs. And as I said yesterday, you got to go back 15 years. Last time we had a team repeat as NFC East division champions. Okay, the Eagles did it back in the day. I think it was 03-04, 2 straight years. So it's been a while. And Philadelphia is going to be chomping at the bit. Right now, I actually picked Philadelphia to win the East with Zeke or without Zeke for the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of that, of course, is going to ride on Carson Wentz staying healthy for 16 games. But is Zeke Elliott underpaid right now for where he is in the pecking order of running backs in the National Football League? Yeah, maybe you could say that. I mean, after all, the guy's won 2 out of the last 3 rushing titles. He's one of the best in the sport. He's only making $3.8 million this year. Now, I hesitate when I say only, because there's a lot of people out there that would love to only be making a hair under $4 million a season. Me included. And he's slated to make about $9 million next year. All right, that number's a little bit more fair, but it's still not up to where some of these other running backs are getting compensated, i.e. Todd Gurley. And when you look at Zeke's importance to this Dallas Cowboys team, I don't think that it can be exaggerated in any way, shape, or form. He is that significant for what they're going to do on offense. And I know that Dak Prescott is the quarterback, and it's a quarterback-driven league, and Dak needs a new contract. And you want to talk about underpaid? Dak is way more underpaid at the quarterback position than what Zeke is slated to earn for running backs. We said it yesterday on the show. Dak right now is slated to make somewhere around slated to be the 78th highest paid quarterback in the National Football League. He's only made $1.6 million so far in his career. And that's the luxury the Dallas Cowboys have when you find a player of his talent in the mid-rounds of the draft. He gets onto the field, he seizes control of the starting job, and he becomes your guy. It affords you to do a lot more with the rest of your roster under the confines of the salary cap, which is a beautiful thing. And you know what? That's why we always say free agency is great. It's nice to go shopping. It gets a lot of headlines. Sometimes you have some big names and big money exchanging hands. But the foundation, the core of any football team is going to be what you do on the draft. That's why we build the draft up each and every year. That's why we make it a 3-day spectacle. Some people maybe don't understand why we make such a big deal. Oh, back in the day, it was done in just a couple of hours, right? It was all done in one conference room in a hotel. It wasn't televised and so on and so forth. Now, the world has evolved, of course, television, media, but the draft is of uber importance to your football team. And if you're very talented when it comes to a scouting staff, you might be able to find some gems that go undrafted. We see guys that go undrafted make the Hall of Fame. And it means that you don't have to pay them as much initially. So you have them under team control for 4 or 5 years, and then you could go pay other players on your team that maybe warrant a significant increase in pay. And the Cowboys right now, that clock is ticking. This might be the last season that they have with Dak Prescott on what amounts to a pretty affordable contract, right? Seattle Seahawks played that game not too long ago when they had Russell Wilson still on his rookie deal, a guy who was not a first-round pick, a guy who was not making crazy money. So it allowed the Seahawks, John Schneider, Pete Carroll, to go out there and pay a bunch of guys on that defense, to pay the Legion of Boom, to get other guys on that unit, which became a championship-caliber defense and really became the foundation of what became a Super Bowl champ. Cowboys don't have a Super Bowl to show for that yet, right? Not just yet. And this might be the last chance they get because Dak Prescott needs a contract. Amari Cooper needs a contract to go with Zeke Elliott. And most people you talk to, and I'll pose the question a little bit later on to Mike Tannenbaum because after all, he was a GM in the National Football League. He's dealt with this stuff when it comes to unhappy players, negotiations, so on and so forth. Very public holdout with Darrelle Revis, if you remember, back in the day with the Jets that played itself out over Hard Knocks, and we all got an inside look into that. But this is different now because you have what amounts to 3 of the key positions on your football team all on the offensive side: quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. The quarterback normally is going to get taken care of first. And from all the conversations that the Dallas Cowboys have had and what Jerry Jones has said publicly, Stephen Jones, it seems as if Dak Prescott is still going to be the guy who's going to get taken care of first. And in most cases, you probably agree with that. You say you have to make the quarterback happy. It's a quarterback-driven league. You would subscribe to that theory. But this is unique with Zeke and the Dallas Cowboys. Because Zeke means that much to this offense, as we've said. But he really doesn't have much of a leg to stand on because he's still got 2 more years left under that contract. And it's not like he's making league minimum here. I threw the numbers out you a couple of minutes ago. $3.8 million followed by $9 million next year. That's good money. It's maybe not upper echelon, top paid running back in the NFL, but it's still pretty good. So I can appreciate the stance that the organization is taking when they say, no, you're under contract. You're not going into your walk year. You have an extra season after that. And in most instances, if you're a club, multiple seasons of team control, you think you got it made in the shade. You know, you heard that term a lot, team control, in the last week when we got to the deadline, the trade deadline in Major League Baseball. When you talked about guys maybe being on the trade block and, you know, why are they attractive? Well, because they have multiple years of team control. So you might be able to get a nice haul coming back in terms of prospects. It's no different like that in the NFL. Similar concept. You want to be able to have guys that you have slotted in and budgeted when you craft out your salary cap for the next coming years. There is money to spend. The Cowboys do have it. Salary cap keeps going up. They should be able to get something done here. What's their pecking order? Again, by all accounts, it sounds like it's going to be the quarterback. Now, can the Dallas Cowboys win without Zeke Elliott, without a happy Zeke Elliott in tow? When you look at the beginning of their schedule this year, let's say the holdout goes into the regular season, and that's something you have to entertain. Cowboys open against the Giants at home week 1. Week 2, they go on the road and take on the Washington Redskins. So whether you think the Giants and the Redskins are going to be playoff contenders or not, and right now, it's probably a reach to say that either one of them are, but those are still 2 divisional games. Okay, division games are important in case you haven't heard. And I would want Zeke Elliott in my backfield, in my huddle for each of those games, and then some. They got the Miami Dolphins in week 3. at home if you want to look a little bit further beyond that. So at least on the surface, those first 3 games are probably manageable. You know, maybe in the back of their minds, they've already had these conversations, which I'm having with you right now. You know, do you think that they look at their schedule and say, boy, you know, Giants, Redskins, Dolphins, you know, those teams aren't going to be that good probably. You know, we could probably beat them without Zeke Elliott. And then let's see if he wants to cave and, you know, make sure that he comes back for when the schedule starts to heat up. Saints, Packers following that. Or do maybe the Cowboys not perform up to their ability and stumble in those first couple of games? And then they say, all right, we have no choice. We got to get Zeke in here. I would be very surprised if this holdout does go into the regular season. I just think that there's too much at stake right now for both parties. Zeke knows, and any other running back knows, that the clock is ticking on his football superiority at the running back position. Because most teams in the NFL, they only value the running back position until a certain time, up until a certain age. And what's that loose number? It's about 30 years of age, where teams look at running backs and say they're damaged goods, because most of them have carried the ball so much. Most of them have absorbed so much of a pounding and so much of a beating that they don't think that they're going to be as effective. So if you're Zeke, you want to cash in right now. Because in 2 years from now, who's to say that he suffers some sort of an injury between now and then? And maybe that zaps him of some of his agility, some of his quickness. And he's not the same back that he's been so far in his career. So I could certainly understand from the player, you want to maximize your earning potential. I totally get that. But if you're the Cowboys, you still look down at that piece of paper right now, and you see a guy who's still under contract for a couple of years. So this is not going away anytime soon. It really and truly isn't. And I think that the comments that Dak Prescott has made, saying that in his conversations with Zeke Elliott, he totally understands where he's coming from. Football and business are two different things. Personal and business are two different things. They can be friends. They can have friendly conversations, which they've had. But Dak said he won't ask Zeke at all about the business side of things. Won't ask him about the holdout, where things stand right now, because it's none of his business. But I wonder if the Cowboys give Dak Prescott a contract extension. What does that do for Zeke Elliott? Does that just harden his stance here? Or is he going to be happy for his friend? And is that just going to maybe make the Cowboys a little bit more inclined to make sure that they pay him? Because you say what you want about Dak Prescott, and I like the guy a lot. I think he's good for the Cowboys. I think he's good for the game. Guy's proven that he's a winner. But if I asked you right now to formulate a list of the elite quarterbacks in the National Football League, you know, I don't know whatever that number is, but even let's just say we go 10 deep. Your top 10 quarterbacks in the National Football League. Dak Prescott on that list? You know, has Dak Prescott proven that he can be a guy to take a football team, put it on his back, and lead you to the promised land? I don't know if he has yet. I can't sit here and tell you with a tremendous amount of conviction that he is that guy. It's been proven that with a good offensive line, with a darn good running game led by Zeke, he's been able to do some good things. You subtract that running game from the offense, and then what do you have? Jury is still out. And if I'm a Cowboy fan, I don't know if that's a game that I'm willing to play right now. And I don't know that that's a road that I want to go down, because it's too risky. Clock is ticking. You want to be able to make sure that you make a run and put all your eggs in that one basket to put yourself in his best position to compete to get to that Super Bowl finally, because it's been a long time. I mean, think about that. We're going on almost 15 years since the Cowboys last played in a Super Bowl. That is a long time. I mean, you got Cowboy fans who never even saw them in the Super Bowl. That run, that dynasty run, that Jimmy Johnson created dynasty run, seems like it was ages ago. And when you look at the NFC, forget about just the NFL in general. The NFC, you got some good teams. You know, you got a team in your own division right now who just won a Super Bowl 2 years ago. And have a lot of guys still in that locker room who were part of that Super Bowl championship team. And they have a quarterback who, if he could stay healthy, plays the position better than the guy who was the quarterback when they won that Super Bowl. So this is dicey. And Cowboy fans are growing impatient. And if they had it their way, they would just pay anybody, pay them all. Make sure they're all happy and get them in camp and get them in to where you can start competing for that top prize again. So we'll talk about the Cowboys situation and what do you think the pecking order should be? Whether it's the quarterback, whether it's the running back, as to who you make sure you take care of first if you're Jerry Jones at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. We touched on the baseball briefly yesterday, the conclusion of the show. And we didn't get a chance to talk about the Mets, who yesterday continue their winning ways, not once, but twice, sweeping a doubleheader from the Miami Marlins. Granted, it's the Marlins. You're supposed to beat them. But I don't care who you're playing. If you have a doubleheader, it's tough to win both games of that doubleheader in a given day. Mets were able to do that. They came from behind in dramatic fashion in game number 2 with 3 home runs in the 7th inning, back-to-back with Conforto and Alonso to put them ahead. The place was rocking. And now for the first time since May the 3rd, the Mets have a winning record. And I know that they have feasted on the little sisters of the poor since the All-Star break. They got the best record in the sport since the All-Star break. And if you would have told me a month ago that I would be sitting here talking about a Mets team that actually was in contention and was in the running to sneak into a wild card, I would have said you were crazy. No way, no how. Because they had not shown you any indication whatsoever that they were capable of turning this thing around. And the schedule was kind to them, and they did what you're supposed to do. Beat up on bad teams. But that's all going to change soon because they have the Marlins for the next 2 days. Then they're going to take a day off, and then the Washington Nationals are coming in for a big weekend series. And then they got to go on the road and visit the Atlanta Braves, the team that's in first place. And then the schedule gets even more difficult as you move through the rest of the month and then into September. So this is not going to be easy. But a couple of things have happened here for the Mets, which have allowed them to get back into the mix here. Number one, they finally are getting the starting pitching like we expected them to get from the get-go. Jacob deGrom, the reigning Cy Young winner, one of the best 2-3 pitchers in all of baseball, is now steadying and anchoring this staff. And once again, looking like that Cy Young winner from a year ago. And overall, he's had a very good year. Not quite on the level he did last year. Take away a few bad starts he had back in April, May. He's probably right where he was a season ago. Noah Syndergaard, to me, has been the biggest X factor. Because the last few times out, this is a guy which is now starting to resemble the Thor moniker that he fashions himself, and that the nickname everybody gave him a few years ago when he was one of the top starting pitchers in baseball. But he has not been one of the top starters, one of the top 10 starters for the last 2-3 years, for a variety of reasons. Durability concerns, just stuff wasn't there. The thing that I look at Noah Syndergaard, and what made me scratch my head, was the confidence seemed to be lacking. This was a guy who had the bravado. This was the guy who went out there and could throw it through a brick wall, challenged hitters. Remember the World Series in 2015. He takes the ball game 3 at Citi Field, throws the ball right behind Eduardo Escobar's head to start the World Series game. Meet me 60 feet, 6 inches away, he would say. But now, despite the fact that he was the subject of trade rumors, Mets decided to stand pat, hold on to him, and maybe there's a little bit of a comfort zone there. And he's starting to feel a little bit more settled in again, and he can block out all the trade stuff. Because he was just named the National League Player of the Week, and he's out there dominating again. So if you get deGrom, and you got Syndergaard pitching like co-aces, if you will, at the top of this rotation, that's only going to better them. Zach Wheeler's been steady. They decided not to trade him, even though he's a free agent at the end of the year. They make the bold move to get Marcus Stroman from the Toronto Blue Jays. He wasn't great his first time out, of course. Over the weekend in Pittsburgh, maybe a little jittery, little nerves, pitching for his hometown team. You expect him to be better next time out moving forward. You got to like where this team is at. Is it sustainable? Do I think that they're eventually going to get all the way there? I'm still not sure. Because the schedule is going to stiffen up a little bit here. But I will say this. The Mets have the makeup of a team that is the classic, you don't want to play them, you don't want to see them if you do get into the playoffs because of that starting pitching. And you saw what happened the last time they made one of these crazy runs in 2015 when they won the division and got into the playoffs with all that young pitching and rode it all the way to the World Series. I don't know if they're winning the NL East this year because the Atlanta Braves are a very good team. And they still got a lot of ground to make up. They're 8 back in the loss column of the Braves. I don't think they're catching them. Wild card is extremely realistic. You hate to get yourself into one of those one-game playoffs, but you're a Met fan. Don't you like the prospect of having Jacob deGrom? You give him the baseball. One game for your life. I think any Met fan would sign up for that. I don't care who's in the other dugout and what team you're facing. And the other thing that's helping the Mets in this race, in this quest, is that these other teams that are in contention are kind of falling by the wayside a little bit, right? Arizona traded away Zach Greinke. Can you really think they're a playoff contender if they trade away your best pitcher? Milwaukee, despite the fact they win last night, they're in shambles right now and in a little bit of free fall. Their starting pitching is a mess. And offensively, even though they had a breakout game last night, they've really been struggling of late. Christian Yelich is trying to carry that team single-handedly. And then Washington and Philadelphia ahead of them in their own division, they certainly have their flaws as well. So you have a bunch of imperfect teams. It's all about who's going to get hot and stay hot as we close out the next 50 games here of this baseball season. But at least they're giving you a reason to watch and to be entertained. Something I didn't think was any way possible a month ago. That was Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less. It's only at Walmart. Now, do you have frequent heartburn like the kind where you have antacid stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I mean. You keep some in your bag or your desk or your car or your nightstand. You have those chalky tablets ready for whenever and wherever heartburn strikes. Well, listen up. There's an easier way to deal with your heartburn. Prilosec OTC. Just one pill a day will last a full 24 hours with zero heartburn. Kick your antacid habit. It's possible with Prilosec OTC. Use as directed for 14 days to treat frequent heartburn, not for immediate relief. Dan Grassa in for Stephen A. It's a Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio.